now we have to wrap up. We've got Alex Selinsky. He's going to share some more Claude Code examples.
Hey guys, actually, I'm not going to share Claude Code examples. I'm going to share how to get the most out of your LLM, and that's inspired by Claude Code. And so this is about thinking in tokens. This is the mental model for actually. I just went down a rabbit hole on this because I had to. Is my audio okay? Even better, Alex says. Cool, thumbs up. Nice. So here's what happened. I finally got into Claude Code. I was using the LLM. I was just chatting away. Thank you for helping me, chatbot. And then I finally moved over to Claude Code, and it was amazing. And things were just happening, and Rappi orders were being made for me, and little apps were being developed. And then I would slam into the usage limitation wall. And I said, why is that? I don't want that to happen. I don't want to pay you a bunch of money for a thing that I've just started using. So I decided to figure out what was going on there, and I want to share that with you. And this should be a nice follow-on to some of the things that Deb was sharing. What I learned is, in summary, long threads make LLMs slower, dumber, and more expensive. And so that's similar to what Deb shared. Every time I prompt something additional in a thread, everything in the thread gets reread again. So it's processed again, and the thread gets longer, and then it's reprocessed again. The most important signal is drowned in the noise of all the chatter. The limits hit faster, and I got to reteach the model every session. And so here's what's happening with tokens. I'm thinking now of tokens as a budget. And while right now in, for example, Claude Code, I've got a 200,000 token budget. I don't even know what that number means. And we're talking about, well, the limits are increased on the off hours, and maybe if I pay more, I get 200 million tokens instead of 200,000 tokens. But the point is, there's always still a ceiling. At some point, you hit the ceiling, and it's just not efficient. And what Claude's doing is the same thing, or the LLM, whether it's Codex or ChatGPT or whatever you're using, it's doing the same thing we would be doing. It's reading the full novel, and it's getting overwhelmed by the full novel and trying to hold that all in its head instead of just the brief or the abstract. So if you imagine like a research paper, I can read the 200-page research paper, but reading the abstract at the top gives me a pretty good idea of what I should be walking away with without having to delve into the depths of it. So what we're talking about here is, how do we get these LLMs to access something like a brief instead of losing all of the energy on the full thread. And another reason for it is the LLMs get worse. They get bad. The results are sloppier because it's trying to manage all this information instead of just the most important stuff. So the two reasons to manage this are, one, you get to do more with less. You won't hit that limit wall, but also the actual output is more effective. It's more on target if you do it this way. So that's what this is about. And so here's some techniques to do that. And the first one is, this one's actually built into Claude Code. I don't know if it's built into other services like Codex, but there's compacting the thread, and it has an auto compact feature. So it's automatically taking the whole you've been talking about in the thread, and it's shrinking it down into an understanding. The problem with that is, I think it sucks. I think it focuses on the wrong things. It still seems to allow the conversation I'm having, the outputs, to get a little bit sloppy, and I don't like that. So you can do a manual compact. You can ask for a summary yourself. You can say what you'd like it to focus on. So I just did one to help me write this presentation. I said, hey, compact this, but keep in mind my purpose in the presentation, which is to understand a mental model of tokens and efficiency. And also, asking for a summary lets you redirect the robot and say, actually, what I think is important is these things, and you're pointing to that thing. So you get to see what they're thinking. So an extension to that is, to compacting the thread is, I wanted to do this in a different order. I'll go here first, is to create a handoff document. And so I actually have a template of what in an MD file of what I want a handoff document to be. And that way I can move from one thread to another, or I can basically I can move from one thread to another that way by saying, hey, make yourself basically an overview, a project overview, as though you're handing off to another person, as though you're handing off to another agent. So when I do that, it takes all the important things, project overview, current status, key decisions, etc., and the next time a new thread starts, it has the full context without having the full. context. So I'll do a prompt at the end to say, or at the end of a conversation, or when I'm coming to a token limit, and I'll say, hey, write yourself a handoff document using the handoff document template. It writes that, tells me where the file is. I give that file to the next thread. Why do I do that? Because fresh threads, as Dev was saying earlier, fresh threads better for new and old topics. It just like gets rid of all the old things that it has to process again and again, right? And gives it a fresh start. I had trouble with this mentally because in my mind, when I write to a human as a human, I'm writing emails. I keep the emails on the topic all in the same thread, right? I reply. My Slack threads, I reply. I keep it all in the same thread so my human mind can organize it. But what's happening is, again, Claude or any of these LLMs are reading through the whole thread again instead of just the highlights. So making a fresh thread on old and new topics allows you to get rid of all the noise and just give the most important things. So the docs that we're creating are the memory instead of the LLM being the memory. The thread is just the work that's happening. The memory of what's important goes into some kind of doc, like an MD file. And so your MD files, which are short for Markdown, it's basically it's a simple text version of what's going on that's machine readable and human readable. What I have instead is project briefs as MD files. So I'm asking Claude to create and the chatbots to create MD files of what we're doing. So it's reading through MD files and summaries instead of, again, the whole conversation. The idea is to just do the thinking one time and store the conclusion. So again, these techniques are all, hey, buddy, LLM, you don't have to rethink about everything. You don't have to reprocess, recreate. We already figured it out. Here's where the information is. So it's a bit like allowing the bot to create SOPs for itself. And I extend that to being kind of my personal system. And so now I have these files that Claude Code and even Claude Cowork can start to update for me as it gets to know me. So what I'm trying to do is create basically a web starting from like the Claude.md, starting from the most like a hierarchy. So there's an index, basically MD file that, and for Claude it's Claude.md, and I'm asking it to point the way to these other preferences files. So again, instead of asking, if I say, hey, I need a flight to Mexico, and you know my travel preferences, right? Instead of reading through everything I've ever done, it goes into the index file and it says, I'm being a personal assistant right now. And then it says, okay, so let me shoot you over to personal assistant MD files. And it says, I'm being a personal assistant for travel. Okay, let me shoot you over to travel preferences. So it's crawling through a web of files really quickly rather than trying to read through everything I've ever done, all its memory ever. So I'm allowing, again, for more efficiency to happen. That's what I'm doing on the file structure side to help the LLM be more efficient and not hit my token wall so quickly. Another thing that I'm doing is choosing machine-first services and tools. And so an example around this is, so already I'm choosing Markdown, right? Markdown files are already there. They're really simple and machine readable. Unlike when I say log into Trello or Asana or something like that. So Cowork, we talked about earlier, if I ask it to help me with my project management and my project management boards in Trello, it can open up my browser, use my live Trello session, get in there, take snapshots, understand the Trello board. But that's processing-wise, it's a lot of work because what it's doing is it's taking snapshots, pictures of the screen multiple times. It's interpreting those screens. That's a lot of processing power. But if I shoot it to the Trello API, it's just running commands and receiving the text. It's just shooting text back and forth. So it's a lot lighter weight to understand. So I shoot it to the API. If I'm doing a social media platform, they're great ones like Hootsuite and CoSchedule, but they're built for humans to read and understand. Late.dev, or I think it's getlate.dev, does the same thing, but it's API driven, API first. It's not as pretty for me to look at, but it's a lot easier for my robots to talk to. And so it's much more efficient. And then the other thing I do with that is, so for example, for Trello, I've got Claude has made basically little scripts, little Python scripts, and little MD files to explain how I like it to use Trello. So then when I say, hey, go do me a do a scrum with me, do a daily stand up with me using my project management board, it doesn't think to itself, oh, what is it? It's Trello. How do I get into Trello? Oh, I'm going to take a snapshot, blah, 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 blah. It goes, great, let me spider my way into the already existing understanding of how to use Trello API in the way that Alex likes it to be used. So again, much more efficient, don't hit my limits, I get better results because I'm allowing all that big context to go out the window and just work with me on the things that I care about. I think I talked about this already, that I use that there's like an index master file, and that allows it to shoot its way to all the other MDs. So again, it's efficiency. And then final technique here is, and this is maybe the most powerful one. I've heard people talk in the chat and also on the other threads that we have going. I'm just going to pay for the bigger plan, get more context, get more usage. Totally cool. Do that. I'll say this. I'm paying the minimum plan on Claude. I'm paying the minimum plan on OpenAI, on ChatGPT and Codex. And now inside of VS Code, I'll start a project, a coding project in Claude Code, and I'll say, hey, Claude Code, plan this project out, help design it out, but double check your work with Codex, with OpenAI's product. So it shoots over, and they have a little conversation to fill in the gaps, and I have a more robust plan and design. And then Claude Code creates the spec using, I use the superpower skill for this, but creates a design spec. I look over it, I approve it, and then Claude Code shoots the development over to Codex, which Dev earlier said is, a lot of us agree it's better at coding, at managing a code base. Codex does a bunch of work, so Claude Code doesn't have to. So I'm not using the tokens over there, I'm using the tokens in OpenAI. So I'm pushing my tokens around across systems so I don't hit my limit. Shoots it back over to Claude Code tests it out, approves it. So I'm getting way stronger output, double the LLM brain, right? And I'm splitting my token usage across two services. So my combined $45 a month plans here feels like the $200 a month plan. So that's that. So I'm multiplying my output when I do it that way. And that's the whole point here, is if I understand how these things kind of think and don't think and how they process the work, I can start to be a lot more efficient, get way better output for way less cost. And so just that model of the tokens is the budget, and I want to be efficient with my token budget. And that's it. Spend tokens on work, not overhead.
Awesome. Thanks, Alex. Let's give you one more minute to answer a question or two,
Sure.
and we'll wrap up before the 2 minutes.
Should I find them, or would you like to?
All right, we got a question from Hani here. What are you using for the two models to talk to each other? You're talking about the Codex and Claude Code. How are you having them talk to each other?
So I've got both of these operating inside of VS Code, and I spent through our DC chat on AI. I was inspired to spend probably like 90 minutes asking Claude Code to do this, to create its skill for itself, to point itself at Codex. And so I brought them both of those tools into VS Code and had them talk to each other. That's the short version.
Awesome. Thanks, Alex. Any other final question for Alex? Personally, I have not heard of this token optimization before. I think that's really smart. And I think this is actually going to be a trend moving forward, because people are already asking, how do I optimize a lower plan? So this is pretty cool.
Tokenomics, says Deb. I like it. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, that aligned perfectly between Dev's presentation. That was great. All right, everyone, let's wrap up. Let's get